Hi. I'm guessing that most of you haven't met my father, and most of you won't meet my father unless there's some sort of cool time machine, in the short-term future that will change things. But I mean, assuming that that's not going to happen, then I thought I'd make this video to sort of start off by sort of giving you some sort of view as to maybe the sort of person he was, and more importantly, the sort of father that he was to me, and where honestly, where some of me comes from. As a profession, he was started off being a computer programmer, but then after earning enough money that he was comfortable, gave up on that, or stopped doing that, and decided to become a actor slash stand-up comedian. Which worked out quite well for him. He enjoyed doing that. Eventually, he stopped doing that due to just sort of momentum issues and things. But I mean, he did pretty well when he was there. He's the punchline on the IT Crowd episode where they do the joke about the Roy's stuck under the table, and they try to distract all the girls by saying there's a really hot guy, half naked outside cleaning the windows, so all the women rush over, and instead there's this big fat ugly man. Well, that's my dad. Literally so fat and ugly, it was a joke. Just one of the many wonderful things I got to say about him. So he got to do things like that. He had a reasonable stand-up career. There are quite a few stand-up comedians I've been still in contact with, who I still massively respect, and who are all doing very well these days, who will all tell you that he was someone they considered to be a good friend, and someone who they considered to be a high-quality entertainer. So that was definitely something that was true, and I imagine that just by knowing those facts you can see some of the similarities in my own life, that I started off with a physics degree as opposed to, maths and computing, which is where he started. Physics isn't miles away, and then I went into sort of writing and directing as opposed to... and I suppose these days I'm doing a fair amount of, performing as well, whereas he was much more into the writing, performing side. But, still very much a going out and trying to be an entertainer. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious that there are some connections there. We both have a very similar analytical mind. We were both dyslexic, and we both massively struggle with depression. So that was definitely something that I suppose technically now he's dead, and seeing as he didn't die through suicide or anything, we can say that he successfully conquered depression, which is not something I'll probably ever get to say until I'm dead. That's probably something that's with me. I will talk about that later. I don't think that's the conversation right now. I've got a lot to cover. So, one of the little quirks my dad used to have, I thought I'd give you some stories so you can sort of understand the person he was. And one of the little quirks he had was he, like I said, he has a very analytical mind, and he used to sort of, when there was sort of a good deal, he loved to get a good deal. So when there were sort of the Kit Kat auctions, where you could collect wrappers and send them off, and you'd get points on the internet, and then you could use your points to bid on things. And he used to basically would as soon as these things started, find the cheapest deal from any supermarket, then buy all of the Kit Kats, and then take off all of their wrappers and then send them all off. But it basically meant that we had loads and loads of Kit Kats, because he'd be the first person with loads and loads of Kit Kat points, so could get some really good deals. And in his defence, he always made his money back. One time I think he spent about £100 on Kit Kat, and he then won a £500 telly, which he then sold on for about £400. So he made £300, and that's ignoring all the other things he won with the points. So, I mean, he made a good deal of it, but there is certainly something about me and my sister used to both go into school with just pockets and pockets full of Kit Kats, but none of which actually had the wrapper, just in the silver foil. and we used to sort of have garages and just drawers filled with loads and loads of Kit Kats, all just in this silver foil and these silver bars. It almost looked like sort of Indiana Jones, particularly when the light hit it, you know, sort of like, you know, the gold bullion in miniature form, only with silver. So he used to do things like that. Coke auctions was another big one. He was very much a, you know, let's run through and collect all of the Coke cans, you know, which means, you know, there was an awful lot of Coke lying around, and that obviously didn't rub off on me in any negative way whatsoever. For those of you who don't know, I do drink a lot of Coke, and a lot is a bit of an understatement. But anyway, moving on. So that was one of those little quirks that he used to have, but was always sort of, you know, trying to work out systems and things, and for the most part that sort of worked out for him. I've just realised that might make him sound a bit more like Del Boy than he really was. He was just one of these people, you know, who would double check and always make sure that he could find the cheapest deal. In fact, one of the few, when my mum checked his emails recently, he was a subscriber to a website which found special offers, and that was the thing that flooded his emails more than anything else. So that was definitely part of who he was, but it wasn't a sort of, you know, he wasn't a big sort of, you know, sell everything on. It was just trying to make sure that he did love a bargain, and that was part of who he was. It's common for people, you know, people with living fathers or with dead fathers, you know, to sort of have daddy issues, and often it's to do with fathers not connecting emotionally. So obviously the first question you have, or I suppose I've missed it if it's your first question, obviously one of the questions you're going to be asking is what sort of emotional state did you have with your father? And the honest truth is just on how we treated each other, we were actually pretty good together. We both told each other and knew that each other loved one another. We were pretty good at being there for each other and letting each other know, and, you know, hugging each other goodbye and things like that. We weren't, I mean, you know, still macho and male, but, you know, we were certainly reasonably close, about as close as I suppose one can expect. I think there are a few differences in that we used to argue a lot, but the thing is that the family that I come from is a family that argues. There were things that used to really annoy me about the way that he used to argue. His family, and him in particular, really came from a, you know, you play with an argument and you jump on whichever side is losing. If someone's having an argument and you think that the other person is wrong, it doesn't matter. If they're losing, you jump in and everyone jumps in to keep trying to equalise it. And as soon as one side starts to win, you jump onto the other side. But then you're also fighting to win. So you always have to try and grab an angle that you can win. And I always sort of wanted some sort of closure to an argument. You know, I wanted if we were saying, who should you vote for? I wanted us to be able to come to a conclusion that one person was a good person to vote for, rather than, you know, him suddenly argue that, you know, Obama was the worst thing for the country, and then, you know, 2 seconds later go, oh well, but, you know, obviously he's massively better than anyone else, you know. And it was just all of those things, just, you know, it's just slightly bugged me in the way that it worked. And I think I was a lot more idealistic than he was. He was a lot more of a, if this is the way the world is, then you can't change it, whereas I'm much more a believer of that humans can do things, and that, I mean, look at the world around us. It's not all fields and we're not monkeys living in trees. Humans can clearly make a difference, and a small number of people doing things is often what is required to help motivate everyone else. And that, I believe that humans have more control than we think that we do, and trying to come up with ways in which we can actually do things was always something that was more important to me than him. Whereas he liked looking at things as an outsider, whereas I sort of was an outsider but wanted to be a bit more inside so I could help influence and change things, and that was definitely something where we slightly disagreed. So this really brings me on to, I suppose, my point where me and my father had perhaps the biggest clash, was that he just has a really cynical, maybe analytical nature. He was one to, you know, pinpoint exactly what was the worst and focus on that. He wasn't someone to sort of, you know, boost morale and things. And unfortunately, I too have inherited that, you know, what's wrong with something. Let's find out what's wrong with something. But the problem is that because that's all he ever got, I very much got this cynical nature, this, you know, everything can be better, constantly from him. And I mean, to give you some examples, I once auditioned for a musical back when I was, you know, only like 11, 12, and I auditioned for this musical that they wanted to take into the West End. It didn't end up going through in the end, but I did manage to get a part. They made a part just for me with no singing, because that's my quality of singing skill. So I got to tell the story of the, oh yes, I'm so good a performer, they made a part for me, but it wasn't a singing part. My dad's response was, no son, they really liked your sister, who, for the record, was very good back then, and only 8, which was because they needed lots of children parts, was very important. And he was there going, no, she's the one that they want, they put you on there just so that you could, you know, just be there. So because if you've got 2 kids going, then parents are more likely to commit, and they took that as a very serious nature. And that's not just a one-off example. I mean, there are many cases like that. I mean, it really wasn't until me and Dan moved in that he stopped telling me pretty much every week that I had to get Dan to sign as many contracts as possible, because he was just going to move on without me, and that he was going to run away and leave me, and wasn't going to carry on doing any sort of partnership material with me, even though we'd been together for a long time and had always planned to do things together and wanted to work together as more than anything. And I think he finally, only in the last few months, stopped actually sort of saying, Dan's going to leave you. So things like that honestly were things that were constantly there, and I already have a brain which goes through and picks out those things. I can already tell you, for example, in the last video, that I feel that I should have had a backlight, and I know I can't actually hang a backlight from where I needed, but I felt that I needed to actually stand out from the background a bit more. I felt that perhaps my clothing was a bit too dark. I'm aware I haven't really exactly improved that this time. I'm currently wearing this shirt that I don't really like, but my dad bought for me, and said that he liked it, so obviously until he died I don't think it ever got worn, maybe once on on laundry day, and so now has been worn quite a bit more. I suspect I'll get out of that fairly soon, but that's why that shirt is there. But it is that, you know, I can already pick up everything that's wrong, and to an extent I know that I kept saying ums and ers too much, and your nose, and I saw all of that, and, you know, if it was me I would have just cut the whole video and not put it up. But that was one thing that we both knew that I needed to improve upon, which is actually to put things out there and to give you some or to give things out there that you can see, and things that are a bit more tangible. So that's definitely something that I wanted to do and wanted to push forward. Now, having said that, and you're having this sort of dark, cynical view of him, on the bright side, he was a great father. I mean, he turned up for me for sort of, you know, school plays and all those things that you sort of have to do for a parent. But, I mean, even later on, he kept doing things like that for me. Only 3-4 months ago, in the summer, Red Cameras, which are a camera company I really like, had a special open day in Pinewood Studios, and my dad drove me up there and sat through what I found to be quite interesting, but ultimately things that I already knew through speeches. But really, you try sitting through 4 hours worth of camera talks when you have no interest in cameras. That shows a level of love and commitment to a son that even then I really appreciated, and that's definitely sort of, and I have more of those stories, and things like when I was younger and we started reading the Harry Potter books. My mum started reading them out to me, and then my dad, who overheard them while we were on holiday when my mum was reading them to me and my sister, started to get into them. He then really got into them eventually, possibly even more so than me and my sister, when he got the third book, he used to go away when he was still a programmer. Used to go away to Bournemouth and stay there for the week, and then just come home for the weekends. And I heard on one Friday that my dad was going to stay up in Bournemouth for another night because he needed to get to the end of Harry Potter book 3. That one was less. Up until that point, we hadn't really been buying them on release. By the time we did buy them on release, I can't remember if it was 4 or 5, but one of them, he took the book back to Bournemouth with him so he could keep reading, because we were reading them as a family. And he actually started reading them over the phone. So me and my sister would both be on the phone in Southend, and he'd still be reading chapters over in Bournemouth down the phone to us. Which, considering that it was he too was dyslexic, just like me, for him to put the effort into those things, are important memories. And he also did the same for Dirk generally. Not so much down the phone, but certainly did sort of help me access things that I couldn't before. So I did have problems with my father, but he was definitely a good dad, and that was the man that he was. And I wanted you to know that that's what he was for me.